time during this century. So let's talk to Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. Our visit presented by Marcus and Mack, voted best law firm, best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row. In the Best of Indiana County contest, visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Not rain. I don't want to talk about rain. Everybody's, geez, rain. I want to talk about something. There's an article today in the Tribune Review, as a matter of fact, about this new disease that is attacking beech trees in Pennsylvania. Discovered in Ohio in 2012, this particular disease, and it's now been found in all 67 of Indiana or Pennsylvania's counties. What do we know about it? And when you get tree diseases like that, there's not a whole lot we can do about them, is there? Except cut down the bad stuff.
Yeah, right. Figure out what the disease or the affliction is, and is it something new? Is it something that's known? It just is showing up here now.
Mm-hmm. In this case,
and what causes it and what spreads it. A lot of times we've had insects involved in the scenario where, yes, it's a disease. It's in certain parts of the country, but then a lot of times there's a vector, and a lot of times it's an insect because those insects are more mobile and move around, and then somehow it gets transported. Of course, we know with some diseases, the spores will travel and can travel for very long distances when the conditions are right on the airstreams, and will bring things to certain areas. But a lot of times there's also an insect vector involved. It's like Dutch elm disease is a good example of that. And that, actually, the disease itself will kill trees, but we've got a beetle involved that vectors it and spreads it and feeds on the tree.
Well, that's a lot of what this is about. It's called beech leaf disease. It's caused by a particular type of nematode, a microscopic thread-like worm, just a tiny little thing. And it is spread mostly through water droplets, or if a bird eats and does not fully digest a carrier nematode, then out it goes, and it's still going, and it's taking down big trees. Tiny little thing like that. It looks like a little piece of thread, and it's bringing down forests worth of trees. So, how do you spray a 140-foot tree?
Well, there are ways to do that, but it's very challenging, and it can only be done in certain instances, economically. You might be able to save individual trees on individual properties, but out in the woods, whole different, large stands of trees, whole different ball game. Same thing with hemlock woolly adelgid, the ash borer,
the emerald
all those.
ash borer.
When we put that out on the large scale, it becomes a lot of times preventative to do those treatments. And so when these things happen, we sometimes can lose a whole species.
Yeah. That's what happened with the chestnut trees.
Yes.
A century ago.
Yes.
For this one, they say, if you stand underneath the tree, you look up into the canopy, you'll see dark stripes between the leaf veins, almost like alternative zebra striping going on these leaves. And then the leaves curl up and they die, and the tree goes along with it. So, yeah, that's not a happy thing.
Nematodes are interesting creatures. There's bigger ones. There's a lot of almost microscopic ones, and there's ones that you can see, but you got to find them. Most times they're in the soil. There are nematodes that attack numerous crops, and you can test for them. A lot of times when commercial growers are planting fruit plantings, whether it be tree fruits or small fruits, it's suggested that they test for nematodes. There are beneficial nematodes, and then there are nematodes that are actual pests. And they have various names. Dagger nematode is one of them, which can feed on roots, but also transmit diseases. So planting blueberries, planting raspberries are two examples, plus the tree fruits. It's suggested to test your soil first for nematodes to see if they're there, and if there are ones that are potential pests, then try to deal with that ahead of time before you make your planting. But they go unnoticed. You can't really can't look at your soil and see them there, and they still could be there feeding on some of the weed species that are there and the broadleafed weeds and able to be supported. And then when we get a susceptible crop planted, then they can do their thing. And a lot of times we don't see it or notice it until the plant starts to decline. Mm-hmm. And then we're going, oh, why is this plant not growing well? And through the diagnostic process, we come up with, oh, well, it could be these nematodes causing the problem.
There were a few years ago when we had a real problem with early blight and late blight at the same time on our tomato crops. And so every year when we get to tomato producing time, we get calls from people who want to know, has it been spotted? Has blight been spotted around our area? And those calls will come.
Right. And to this point, no.
But one of the factors in that was it was a really wet summer.
Yeah.
We are at the beginning of what might be a really wet summer. Sure looks like it with the weather that we've had so far. May was wiped out. June is not particularly promising. We've had a couple of good days here this week, but the forecast is calling for more wet stuff. In terms of prevention, we have talked before about spraying for blight, whether it's been seen or not, as a preventive. Are the sprays that are available now commercially that we're able to use, are they set up to be able to help us in a preventive mode? And when is the time at which we should begin to think about spraying them on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, now's the time. If you have the plants in the ground, especially tomatoes, they're susceptible to a number of different diseases, including early blight and late blight. Now, early blight is usually around. Those spores will overwinter here. So if you've had a history of growing tomatoes in your garden, some of those spores are probably around the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to keep those, especially young plants, healthy along the way. So early blight. There's another one called Septoria leaf spot. There are bacterial blights that will get on tomatoes. And so most diseases were always functioning in a preventative mode. We have to have any sprays, whether it's a certified labeled organic spray or whether it's a more conventional spray. In either case, we've got to have the material on the leaves covering the leaf surface before the disease lands, the spores land, and start to grow. Mm-hmm. If we don't, then we'll have an infection. And some of that, a little bit of early blight, a little bit of septoria leaf spot, we can handle that. The plant can handle that. But if we're going to be in a rainy weather pattern, for weeks and months, then we've got to have those on there every week to help prevent and keep those plants healthy. And one of the reasons we have to do it every week is every material that's labeled for use for, say, whether it's early blight, late blight, leaf spot, the frog eye leaf spot's another one. Those need, each one has a different chemical makeup. Mm-hmm. So, and its breakdown period varies. They're not all made the same. So sunlight might work on one product more so than another, and just time. There are various organisms, fungi, et cetera, that break down these chemical structures too. Mm-hmm. So again, it goes back to the chemical structure and the makeup of that material as to how fast, it'll break down or how long it will last.
Plus, if it's a particularly rainy period, then that stuff's going to wash off.
Right, and then, yes, you can get loss over time from that. And then the other reason we reapply regularly is the plant continues to grow. So, yes, you went out 7 days ago and you treated the plant. Well, in the last 7 days, it might have doubled in size. Mm-hmm. So you have 50% more leaf area there that you didn't have before, and so all that unprotected surface is vulnerable to being attacked. Yeah. So we kind of have to keep on a regular schedule for a number of different reasons. Mm-hmm. And on a wet year, it's a lot more challenging. Now, sure, you can, if you see a little bit, especially early blight, which tends to really start on the bottom of the plant most of the time, you can pinch off a few of those leaves. If you start to see that you've got some infection there, we can go in and pinch some of those leaves off because typically we have enough plant there to deal with that. And that can be one of the early control measures, cultural practices to help minimize that disease, as will mulching do the same thing because we put a barrier between the soil where those spores are splashing up onto the plant. So if we can protect that plant, that helps a lot.
Yeah. Stop splashing your plants.
Yeah.
All right. There you go. So, this was particularly distressing, this segment with Bob this morning. But what are we going to do? All right. Thank you, Robert. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com.